All right, hello everyone. Welcome to Skype a Scientist Live. My name is Sarah McAnulty. I am a squid biologist and I run Skype a Scientist. We are, as many of you I think know, a program that tries to connect people with science wherever you are. We match scientists with classrooms for free. So if you want to talk to a scientist with just your group, we've got that available. Go to skypeascientist.com and you can make that happen. Today, we're going to be talking with one of my favorite entomologists. Alie Kratzer. We're going to be talking all about bugs in your backyard. We'll start with an introduction of what Alie does and why she likes it. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Uh, so, First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to speak with everybody. This should be a lot of fun today. As Sarah said, my name is Kratzer, but I like to go by Alie, so you can call me Miss Alie. I'm an entomologist or bug scientist, as well as an award-winning author and illustrator. My first book was about wasps, and my latest book was about cicadas. Today, we'll be taking a very brief look at some of the different kinds of critters that probably live in your backyard. Then I'll share just a few of my favorite facts about wasps and cicadas, and then we'll have lots of time for questions at the end. So, you can usually tell what kind of bug you're looking at by the number of legs that it has. I'm going to give you some examples, but I'm going to skip over most of the smaller groups. So if your favorite bug isn't here today, it's not because I've forgotten it. It's just that we don't have enough time to cover all of them. If a bug has all the legs, more legs than you can easily count, it's probably either a millipede or a centipede. Millipedes are slow and docile and feed on dead plant material. They help recycle nutrients in the ecosystem. Centipedes look very similar, but they are quick hunters with venomous fangs. They're like if a snake was a bug. Still, they won't try to hurt you unless you try to pick them up. If a bug has 5 pairs of legs, it's probably a crustacean. The most common crustaceans in the US are isopods, which are also called roly-polies, and crayfish. Isopods live under rotting logs, and crayfish are like little lobsters that live in rivers and streams. Crayfish can give you a little pinch if you bother them, but my hand was not harmed in this photo. If a bug has 4 pairs of legs, it's probably an arachnid. The best known arachnids are the spiders, the scorpions, which both hunt bugs. Uh, Most spiders are completely harmless, for the record. Um, Mites are tiny, and most of them are either hunters or scavengers. Ticks are a group of relatively large mites that evolved to feed on blood. They can make you sick, so make sure to let an adult know if you find one. Harvesters are like mites that have very, very long legs, but they're completely harmless too. If a bug has 3 pairs of legs, it's probably an insect. Over half of all known species in the world are insects. They play a they play every role in nature that you can imagine. Dragonflies and damselflies are flying aces, which catch other bugs out of the sky to eat them. Grasshoppers, crickets, and katydids eat plants, and some of them can sing. Now, usually when people say bug, they just mean any little critter that they find. However, when scientists use the word bug, they usually only mean the true bugs, which mostly eat plants and include insects like aphids, cicadas, and stink bugs. The 4 largest groups of insects all go through complete metamorphosis, which means they start life as a worm-like larva or caterpillar, then they grow a hard protective shell as a pupa or a chrysalis, and then emerge as a fully grown winged adult. These groups are the beetles, the ants, bees, and wasps, the butterflies and moths, and the true flies. There are hundreds of thousands of different kinds of each of these insects, each with a really important role to play in nature. If a bug doesn't have any legs, though, it's either a larva of a different insect, or a snail, a slug, or a worm. Snails, slugs, and worms are totally different kinds of animals uh, than all of the other bugs we've talked about so far. A slug has more in common with a squid than it has in common with a beetle, as Sarah would be able to tell you. Now, I'm going to share some of my favorite facts about wasps. Some wasps are solitary, which means they find food and lay eggs all on their own. Most solitary wasps don't have a stinger and can't hurt you. Other wasps are social, which means they cooperate together to build their own little societies. Most of my own research has focused on the social species. To start off, wasps are really important pollinators. Wasps pollinate just as many flowers as bees, but they prefer to visit different kinds of plants. In addition to many wildflowers, wasps pollinate important food crops like carrots, parsnips, celery, and sunflowers. Wasps are also really important for the food chain. At the bottom of the food chain, we have plants, which are eaten by bugs that we think of as pests, like grasshoppers, beetles, caterpillars, and flies. Social wasps are so important because they're not picky eaters. They hunt all of these different plant pests and help to protect the plants that we eat. They are especially good predators of harmful caterpillars. Social wasps, in turn, are hunted by lots of larger animals. They're an important food source for many birds and lizards, and they're also really important for mammals that hibernate. Baby wasps, which are protected within a wasp's nest, are a yummy treat for bears, skunks, raccoons, opossums, and coyotes. These mammals eagerly brave hundreds of stings in order to store up on food for the long winter. Large mammals are a big threat to wasps, though social wasps evolved to defend their young by stinging. Unfortunately for us, they can't really tell the difference between a bear and a person, so sometimes they sting us too. So again, if there are fewer wasps, there will be more plant pests and fewer plants. However, when there are lots of wasps, there are fewer plant pests and more plants. There are a few really important things you can do to reduce your risk of getting stung by wasps. I haven't been stung a single time since I started studying wasps up close years ago, so I know these tips work. Still, wasps are wild animals, and these tips are not magic, so interact with wasps at your own risk. If you find yourself next to a wasp nest, stay calm, breathe slowly, and move slowly. Wasps are attuned to sense rapid movements and carbon dioxide in our breath. So if you minimize these, you minimize your risk. Again, stay calm, breathe slowly, and move slowly. If you disturb a wasp nest, or if you're stung next to a nest, stay calm, move quickly away from the nest, and alert others. Try to avoid flailing about too much. Erratic movements will increase the likelihood of more stings. Make sure to alert other people in the area to the danger so that nobody else gets hurt. Again, stay calm, move quickly, and alert others. Wasps usually only try to sting people when defending their nest or if they are squeezed or swatted. A single wasp typically won't try to hurt you on purpose. To avoid accidental stings, you should wear closed-toed shoes when you're outside. Now, unfortunately, wasps don't understand things like outdoor markets and picnics. They smell the food and fly in to eat it, and then they get frightened by the big humans trying to hurt them. The best way to prevent wasps from panicking is to avoid attracting them to begin with. Many species of wasps are attracted to meat, rotting fruits, and sugary fluids like sauces, juices, and soft drinks. When you're outside, make sure to properly cover food and drinks and dispose of waste in an appropriate covered bin or container so the wasps won't be able to smell the food from as far away. Now I'm going to share some of my favorite facts about cicadas, and then we'll get to questions. Cicadas begin their lives as a little egg stuck to the stem of a plant. A tiny rice-sized nymph hatches from the egg, falls to the ground below, digs into the soil, and begins to feed on roots underground. The nymph feeds on larger and larger roots over time, shedding its skin as it grows. When it's ready to emerge, the nymph builds a small capped chimney out of mud and waits for nightfall. It climbs up the nearest surface and sheds its skin to become a winged adult. Adult male cicadas attract females with their song. They mate, and the female creates small incisions in the stem of a host plant to begin the cycle anew. Cicadas feed on plant sap, but that isn't all bad news for the plants they feed on. In exchange for a dependable source of food, cicada nymphs provide aeration and water routing for a plant's roots through a simple network of tunnels. Cicadas and their host plants have evolved together for millions of years into what is usually a symbiotic partnership. But that's just one side of the food web. Let's look at how cicadas fit into our natural ecosystems. At the bottom of the food chain, cicadas eat plants. After that, nearly everything else eats cicadas. Cicadas are large, completely defenseless, and often announce their location by calling out to a hungry world. Almost everything loves to eat them, which makes cicadas a very important food source in every ecosystem they inhabit. Cicadas are uh, important food for songbirds, mammals, reptiles, and even other invertebrates like wasps and spiders. Cicadas are hunted underground by moles and snakes, and in the sky by bats and dragonflies. So, when cicadas are plentiful, animal life feasts and flourishes, and when they go missing, animal life suffers as a result. Because there are so many bugs and so few bug scientists, we're able to make incredible new discoveries about bugs every day. I help find new species all the time. Here are some of my favorites that I personally helped to discover. Um, Most of these particular species live in the American tropics. There is still so much more to learn, and anyone with a camera or a sketchbook can easily make new contributions to the field. We live in a golden age of bug science. And with that, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about bugs, and let's answer some questions.
All right, thank you so much. Everyone, if you have questions, I can see a lot of you have already started doing this, but submit them to the Q&A. It's at the bottom of your screen, and we will get through as many as we possibly can in the next half hour. Okay, our first question is from Ayana. What is your favorite bug? I realize that is a tough question.
So I change my answer every time somebody asks because there's so many to choose from, and they're all so interesting and wonderful. Um, let's see. I think my current favorite, hmm, I think my current favorite is a tiny little wasp, called a silk wasp, which lives in the Amazon rainforest. And they make these little tiny little nests out of silk that they produce themselves. Um, and almost nothing is known about them.
Cool. Sounds good. Our next question is from Renfro, fourth grade. How do cicadas make their sound? And is it the same as how a cricket chirps?
That's a fantastic question. So they are different. The two different groups of insects, the crickets and cicadas, make their sound in different ways. Cicadas have two little organs called tymbals, which are sort of at the base of their back. Um, and they have these really powerful muscles that like sort of pop them in and out really, really fast, almost like a tiny digital speaker. Um, or if you've ever played with one of those toys that you like set in the counter and then it pops up, it's like that, but it happens really fast. Crickets, on the other hand, make their sound by rubbing their wings together in a process called stridulation. So different parts of the body doing different things, but both create interesting sounds that we can hear.
Cool, thanks. Mrs. Faye Gilmore's third grade class wants to know, how long is the lifespan of a wasp?
So it depends on the wasp. Um, Most wasps live less than a year. They're usually only around when it's warm out, here in temperate climates. In tropical climates, they can live a little bit longer. Um, Around here, if you find one of those big nests in like a tree somewhere in the winter, by the time you actually can see it, there's no more wasps inside. Most of them don't survive. Only the queens will go and bury themselves in a little bit of soil to hibernate through the winter. Um, so it depends on the individual and it depends on the species, but usually less than a year.
Cool. Duncan, age 8, wants to know, why do cicadas have such a long pause in their life cycle?
I assume you're talking about the when they're underground for so long and then they only come above ground for a little bit of time to fly around and make all the noise. Um, the reason they're underground so long is because they need to stock up on nutrients, and it takes them a long time to do that. They're feeding on plant roots, but specifically on a fluid called xylem, which is coming from the ground and into the tree, and it's mostly water with just a tiny bit of nutrients in it. So it just takes them a really long time to get enough energy to grow.
Sounds good. This is from an anonymous attendee. Have you ever been bitten by a spider?
I have not. I have handled lots of large spiders in my day, but for the life of me, I just can't figure out how to get them to bite me.
You got good energy. You got like the spider knows that they're safe. That's good. That's good. Every spider I've been bitten by has been like a total accident. It's not a spider that I knew was there,
Uh-huh.
accidentally roll over one or something. And that's on me. Okay, the next question is from G4 GAB Will Owens. Do only true bugs look like leaves?
Some true bugs look like leaves. Most of them don't. But there are tons of different insects that mimic leaves, outside of the true bugs. I can think of, there's types of stick insects that very much look like leaves, sort of the way their wings are shaped. There are types of katydids where if you saw one, you would think that like somebody is trying to pull one over on you. They look so much like leaves, and I encourage you to go look them up after this. But yeah, there's lots of different types. It's amazing how often insects try to look like leaves to keep from being found by the things that want to eat them.
Yeah, katydids are so impressive. Mrs. Owens' class wants to know, what's the largest bug you have seen in person?
The largest bug I've seen in person was at the Cornell University Insect Collection. In one of their back rooms, they had a specimen of this incredibly large stick insect. It was actually this big, from, I believe it was Southeast Asia. And I have a picture somewhere, but I can't pull it up right now. But just picture a bug that's this big, that's sort of kind of thin in the middle, almost looks like a lobster, but it lives on land. Um, they we don't get them that big in the United States, but
They're so cool. Sort of related to that question, you just used the word lobster. Anonymous wants to know, why do crayfish look like shrimp?
great question. The answer is that they're very closely related to other types of crustaceans. Specifically, there's a couple of different groups of crayfish, and some of those groups are even more closely related to lobsters than they are to other crayfish. They're literally just freshwater lobsters, if you want to think about it that way.
Cool. Michelle wants to know, what determines what types of bugs are in my backyard?
Well, it depends on where you are. It depends on the climate that you live in. Um, and the elevation and how much humidity you get. Um, Depending on where you're at in the United States, or elsewhere in the world, there's a lot of different types of bugs that live in a very small area. So I almost guarantee that there's a bug where you live that exists there and nowhere else.
Yeah. It
But
also
without knowing where you are, I can't give you specifics.
one nice way to learn about the bugs that live near you is a tool called iNaturalist. There's an app for it, and there's also a website. If you go to iNaturalist, is it .com or .org?
I should know this.
Uh,
I think it's
well, if you Google iNaturalist, you're gonna find it. It's basically like a
.org. .org.
.org. Okay, cool. It'll show you all the critters, plants, all organisms that people have seen in your area. So if you're like, I wonder if a rosy maple moth lives near me. Rosy maple moths are like they look like pink lemonade. They're like bright pink and yellow. And they live near me in Philly and New Jersey, all over this area. But they don't live in like California. So you can look to see like what's around. It also kind of depends on like what you do in your backyard. I live smack in the middle of the city in Philadelphia. And if I don't put plants in my very, very small backyard, there will be fewer bugs there than if I plant a bunch of native plants. I planted milkweed in my backyard, and then monarch butterflies started showing up to my backyard. They didn't hang out in my backyard when it was just concrete back there. So, like, what you do also impacts what bugs show up. Next question is from Callie. How long have you been a bug scientist?
So I've been a bug scientist since a little bit before I graduated from college. Um, I had an unrelated job. And then every evening I would go home and I would paint insects. And it turns out if you do that enough times, sometimes that accidentally spirals into a book, which accidentally snowballs into a whole career of its own. So that's sort of how I got into this. So I've been doing it, I believe, for about 6 or 7 years at this point.
Nice. We got a question from Ayana. Why do fireflies glow?
Great question. Um, there's two different answers to this. One is the technical answer and one is the reason for it. Um, Fireflies glow because they have a little chemical. I think it's called
Luciferin?
thank you. Uh, and they sort of break that chemical apart and it produces a flash of light. And they keep doing that in a little organ they have underneath their belly to produce a sustained glow. But the reason they do that is usually to attract a mate. So the same reason that cicadas sing, to sort of project themselves out into the world, fireflies will flash with light. Although there are some deceptive firefly beetles that will flash with a different species pattern in order to lure them in and then eat them. So there's a whole lot of stuff going
Sneaky
on.
bugs. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Next is from Addie in third grade. Are there any pink bugs?
Yes, there absolutely are. One of them, Sarah mentioned earlier, is the rosy maple moth, which we have here on the East Coast. There are pink grasshoppers, there's pink katydids, there are several other types of pink moths. One of them is really beautiful. It's a type of moon moth, so that one of the ones that have big wings and then really long tail at the ends. There's a pink one of those. I think it lives also in Southeast Asia, but yes, they're very pretty.
Cool. I'm gonna have you stop sharing screen so that the interpreter is a little bit bigger for people to see.
Absolutely.
Sweet. And then we can put any links also. Great. Okay. In the chat too. Okay. Next question comes from Riley. What is your favorite thing to do while looking for bugs?
Um, Honestly, it's a great experience to just invite other friends along, even people who aren't necessarily as interested in bugs as you are, um, and just make it a sort of a social occasion. I love going hiking with friends, and chatting as I stop every five feet or so to take a picture of a different bug.
I like to do this too, as you know. Our next question is from Ella. Why do some insects have see-through wings?
Good question. So back when insects first evolved, all of their wings were clear. Um, the different color patterns that other insects have on their wings nowadays was sort of a secondary thing that eventually evolved in different groups. Um, so the ones that are clear are sort of the default, and then the ones that are patterns are specialized. They have a specific function.
Cool. Our next question is from Vivan in kindergarten. Vivan would like to know, how heavy is a tarantula?
Hmm.
Let's go,
So it
how is the
depends.
heaviest tarantula? Because there's a wide range of tarantula sizes. I don't know what the biggest tarantula is, though.
The biggest tarantula is like if you cup both your hands together, is about that big. Um, or at least my hands. I don't know. Your hands might be smaller than my hands, but I'd say it weighs about the same as maybe a gerbil, if anybody's ever held a gerbil before. So like they're not that heavy, but they got some heft to them.
Yeah, that sounds great. Jace from Mosier Elementary wants to know, do you know why snails leave a trail of goo?
So snails are not my specialty, and in fact, Sarah, I think you might be able to answer this slightly better because you study mollusks in
I'm
general.
closer than insects to, I mean, the simple answer is they leave a trail of goo because they need to protect their like delicate little bellies while they slide over the earth. And so leaving that like mucus trail helps like keep everybody safe as you're sliding over a bunch of different stuff. Why do they leave it behind though? I don't know. Like that seems pretty expensive to do, to be constantly making goo. But a lot of times mucus, whether it's the mucus that like hagfish create, hagfish, if you've never seen one before, highly recommend looking those up. They're goofy.
Well, it depends.
I think they're cool. I think that they're a little
They are
scary.
cool, but
They're scary. So depends on who you are, I guess. But they're something else. They produce like obscene amounts of slime. Like one time I don't know why this was the case. There was like a truck carrying a bunch of hagfish that got in like a car crash, and
yes.
there was just like hagfish slime all over the highway. It was like comical amounts of slime. Um, Sometimes things can seem more expensive energetically, like to make than it seems it's like because of the structure of the stuff inside, when you add water, it expands a lot. So you don't actually putting a lot of stuff into the goo. Anyway, long story short, why do they make goo? They need it to move. It helps them move. That's the
Thank you.
long answer to a short question. Yeah. All right, next question. Hunter from Virginia says, why do wasp stings hurt worse than other types of stings?
Great question. The answer is that there's different stuff in there.
Yeah.
Each of the different insects that has the ability to sting produces a different kind of venom. So, there are a lot of wasps that sting just a little bit, and it just hurts like a little pinprick, and that's all it can ever do. And there's some wasps that can sting, and it hurts for a really long time, really bad.
Yeah.
Um, so
Cool.
there's a chemical answer that I don't know the
Venom,
full story
kind of.
of, but you probably also
Yeah.
don't want to know.
Florence, 10 years old, wants to know, can you befriend a bug?
Friendship between species is a difficult thing to judge, because we experience the world so much differently than other animals and other creatures. Um, so on
I'm
some
very
level, I think that the answer is yes. I think there could be some recognition of another creature, um, benign, interaction. But you probably won't be able to add them on social media.
true. So true. I have a pet uh bug, using the word bug loosely here. This is
Aw,
a giant African millipede. She hangs out in my office. Her name is Francine. She's just snoozing right now because it's daytime and she's nocturnal. But you can have a like a classroom pet bug. Does Francine think we're friends? Hard to say. I feed her, I take care of her. But like my cat Otis is my friend. She follows me around, she talks to me all day. Whereas Francine really doesn't. But here we are, we live in the same house. So friends, sort of. Um,
There's
Good.
also a very wide scale of like the relative intelligence of different types of bugs. Like wasps and bees are really, really smart. Cicadas not so much. So, but I also wouldn't recommend trying to keep a wasp as a pet for other reasons.
Yeah,
Um, so
good answer. Bridge Academy in Virginia wants to know, when did you decide that you wanted to be a scientist?
ever since I was a little girl, I have always been curious about the world, and I've always been with my hands dirty out in the backyard, trying to learn more about the world that we live in. Um, so in a sense, I've always been a scientist. It's just now I occasionally get paid for it.
This is good. Yeah. Declan wants to know, how do bugs protect themselves from their predators?
That is a really big question because every single bug has a different answer to that question. I can give you some examples though. Like we talked about a little bit earlier, some bugs will disguise themselves either as leaves or as other species of bugs, especially trying to pretend to be other bugs that are more dangerous. Like there's a bunch of different kinds of moths that look very similar to wasps, even though they're not wasps and they can't sting. Um, there are a whole bunch of different kinds of bugs, like Francine, um, who have a hard protective shell. And I think Francine is also capable of producing certain very untasty compounds, if anything was ever to try to eat her. Um, there are bugs that have venom, like wasps. There are bugs like cicadas that just have a whole lot of babies so that even if some of them die, there will always be some of them around. Um, there's as many different kinds of strategies to avoid getting eaten as there are different kinds of bugs in the world.
Yes. Next question is from Michelle. Why are some bugs shiny?
Also a very big question, but also a good question. So a lot of bugs are shiny because they are trying to broadcast that they're there. Like, don't eat me, I taste very bad. Um, Sometimes bugs will use a type of shininess called iridescence that sort of breaks light into a rainbow pattern. Um, and you'd think that they would be like super, super visible if they did that. But if they're in the tree canopy and it's just a little flicker of light, it's very difficult to find them. Um, so yeah,
Cool. Martha wants to know, why are there so many people afraid of spiders?
I'm not really sure. I think it's something to do with just we collectively as a society decided that spiders were gross or creepy, and then everybody just sort of got on board with it. But also, I'm very biased because I'm not afraid of them at this point in my life, so it's hard for me to understand that point of view. But we should always be kind to people who are afraid of things, even if we ourselves are not afraid of them.
Yep. I used to be deathly afraid of spiders, just like heart racing, sweaty, afraid of spiders. And then I took a bunch of pictures of spiders' faces. I did like spider portraits, and now I'm not afraid of spiders anymore. So it can go away. If you're afraid of spiders, you might not always be afraid of spiders. It can improve. We got a good question from South Miami Middle. They're in South Miami. They've got lots of mosquitoes. How can you avoid mosquitoes? Is there a way to prevent mosquitoes from biting you?
So scientists are still very hard at work trying to find solutions to that problem because mosquitoes can be really dangerous in addition to being really annoying and very itchy. Um, because they can carry diseases that make people very sick. Um, so some different things that scientists are trying to figure out is if they can, uh, how do I explain this? They're trying to find better chemicals to use that just target mosquitoes,
Mhm.
and just kill them and nothing else. And they're trying to, uh,
With the Wolbachia or whatever it is, the
yeah, that's the type of bacteria. It does also affect other insects though, which is
not
it
ideal.
it causes other problems also. But
Do
the
like genetic manipulations effectively and then introducing
yeah,
genetically
yeah.
manipulated insects to like infiltrate the population and then negatively impact the population. It's complicated stuff, but
Yeah,
basically using genetic engineering to try to reduce the population. And if you don't know what genetic engineering is,
that's a
don't
subject for a
worry
different
about it.
type of
Don't worry about
scientist.
it.
Yeah.
It's like we'll talk about that in another session. Yeah. Um, Here's a good question from Martha. What is the wildest place you've ever been while studying bugs?
Oh gosh. So a lot of my own research is done sort of in my office, just communicating with other scientists in different parts of the world and helping them, or visiting museum collections and going through all of their millions of insect specimens and trying to figure out patterns in everything that's there. Um, so I don't travel as much as some other entomologists, um, but um, I did have the opportunity to go to Hawaii a couple of years ago, and I found a whole bunch of interesting spiders and stuff when I was there. So that was a lot of fun.
Biggest centipedes I've ever seen in my life were in
Oh
Hawaii.
yeah, I pet one.
I'm scared. I'm scared. That's talking
You
about
shouldn't
bugs.
do that, but I
Jeff.
did.
I'm scared. We were out at night, at like the place where a bunch of albatrosses hang out, and we totally did not realize how long it was going to take to get out there and get back. So like we had headlamps with us. We were out there at night by accident. And when the sun went down, like the geckos came out, the cane toads came out, and the millipedes came out, or not millipedes, centipedes came out, and I could not believe how big they were.
They're like this long.
Huge. They're like, yeah, they're like the size of a huge magic marker, like bigger than a Crayola marker.
Mhm.
It was, I'm trying to think of like classroom items that are as big as they were, really big. All right. We got a question from Janet in second grade. What is the fastest bug?
Ooh, that's a very good question. Um, I think it's a type of dragonfly. I'm pretty sure. The dragonflies are the strongest flyers in the insect kingdom. And insects are the only type of bugs that can fly. Um, so that's my guess. I don't know exactly what kind. The fastest running bug is probably going to be a tiger beetle, which are usually bright colors and run across the ground really fast.
They're so cool. Um, okay. We got a question from a fourth grade class. What is the largest butterfly?
The largest butterfly. I know the largest moth. I'm gonna have to think about the largest butterfly. I know the largest butterfly in the United States is the giant swallowtail.
Okay,
90%
good.
certain about that.
Sounds
Um, which is like this, I think. They're big.
big. That's cool. Where in the US they live?
They live here.
They live
So
here. Cool.
um, that's not helpful to anybody but me and Sarah. Sorry, I live pretty close to Sarah,
Yeah.
relatively speaking.
Yeah.
We're on the East Coast.
Right. Oh, good question from Forrest, age 12. Why aren't there that many blue bugs?
Fantastic question. So that is because um there's two different types of color when we talk about insects. Um, one of them is called structural color, which is when there's these little microscopic indents in a surface that causes the light coming in to diffract in various ways, which is not something you have to worry about. But it does a science to it, and then it becomes a rainbow of colors, and sometimes those colors can be blue. Um, there's also pigmentation, though, in addition to structural coloration. And pigmentation is when the chemical itself just absorbs light and always sends back out the same color. Um, so because blue takes more energy to create, there are fewer types of pigments that can reflect blue light. Um, and so there's only, I think, around six species of insects that actually have blue pigmentation that we know about. Um, and I think all of them are butterflies.
Cool. Yeah, blue bugs are so cool.
Yeah.
Right, we got a really interesting question from Martha. Why were bugs in prehistoric times so big?
Well, not all of the bugs in prehistoric times were so big, but some of the very first bugs really were very big. Especially a group called the griffin flies, which are close relatives of dragonflies and damselflies, but they could get to the size of like eagles. And the reason they could get so big is because the atmosphere, the air that we breathe, had way more oxygen in it back then than it does now. Um, so that meant that uh, insects could uh, breathe much easier. And uh, Okay, so the way that insects breathe is they just have a lot of tubes in their body, and because they're so small, the air just sort of ends up in all of their tissues without them having to do any extra work. Like they don't have like a heart like we do. Um, I mean, not, I'm sure that
Quite like we do.
anyway.
Yeah.
Um, uh, so most like insects of today can't get that big because they would suffocate. They just wouldn't be able to get enough air into their bodies. But back then, because there was more oxygen, they could get much bigger.
Yep. Difference in the atmosphere, the climate. Climate changing means different stuff can thrive. All right. Which bugs like flowers? So
There's
many.
a lot of bugs that like flowers. Um, there's a whole bunch of different types of beetles and flies and butterflies and moths. Um, there's a lot of different types of bugs like different parts of the flowers too. There's a whole bunch that are pollinators that like to go after the nectar that flowers produce in order to help them pollinate. Um, but some of them just like to munch on the petals too. So it depends on the group.
All right. Thank you. Okay. So we are now minutes from time here. So we always ask everybody the same two questions at the end of every session. The first
Okay.
question is, if you had everyone's attention in the whole world and you could tell them anything about your area of expertise or like that falls within your area of expertise, what would you tell them?
Whew, there's a lot to say. I think the most important thing is that um, wasps really are as important as bees, and we depend on them more than they depend on us.
Cool. That sounds
Yeah.
great. Our next question is similar. You still have everybody's attention in the world, and you can tell them one thing about absolutely anything. Doesn't have to be science related. Can if you want. What do you tell them?
Uh,
It's a big question, I
it
realize.
is a big question. Um, I'd say that try to treat other people a little bit kinder.
That's pretty reasonable. We're gonna need kindness. Oh boy, for the next couple years, even more than we already did, and we already needed it a lot. So, great.
Also buy my books. That's also nice.
Oh yeah, also buy your books. Where can people buy your books?
They can find it at my website, owlflyllc.com. That's owlflyllc.com. Or just search for Cicada Book or Wasp Book online. You'll probably find it that way too.
Cool. Great. All right. And I'm sorry to all the over 200 questions that we didn't get to.
Oh my goodness.
We got through as many as we could. But as a reminder, if you want to talk to a scientist with just your group, you have a really curious bunch or a regularly curious bunch, feel free to sign up for a session just for you. We try to get through as many questions as we can here, but whew, we love how curious you are, but we can't do it all. We don't have time. So thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. And one last time, I'm going to plug our Love Bug Valentines. There's four different designs, and they're really cute. We made them here in Philadelphia. Like the artist was in Philly. They're printed in Philly. I'm packing them up in Philly, but we're shipping all over the place. So if you can help support our program by buying cute art. That you share with your friends. Hey, that's pretty good. You can get those at squidfacts.net, which is also linked on the Skype a Scientist website. The next session that we will be having is going to be in February. It is going to be about eels, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, we're going to have, this is going to be a different one. We're going to have an eel historian come on and talk about how sometimes like science and history can coincide, can overlap. And we'll be talking about eels, mostly in medieval Europe and why eels are so important. It's going to be a slightly different one, but we're pretty excited about it. So I hope you want to learn about eels too. We'll see you next month. That'll be on February 19th, same time, same channel, same RSVP mechanism. We'll see you then. Allie, do you have anything else you'd like to say before we say goodbye?
Oh, just thank you so much for being here today. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks for sharing all your knowledge with us. Really appreciate it. All right. Bye, everybody.